Good morning. Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the November edition of Men's Club. Welcome to all of you joining us from Zoom land, and also welcome to all of you joining us in person. I'd like to throw out a little bit of advance information that we have a meeting coming up in December 19th. I am told that our speaker and our topic will be quite interesting. Speaker will be a member of actually the Temple Shalom Budget Committee, and also we'll be speaking on gun control in the United States. In January, date to be announced, the speaker will be an expert on public health and on pandemic control that lives in Colorado Springs. I'm sure that's going to be interesting for all of us that wonder why we're wearing masks and how long we'll have to do so. Today I'd like to introduce David Arnstein, who will give us the benefit of his knowledge and experience with the Devar Torah for today. The rabbi will follow, and I'll let you know what he'll be speaking about after David finishes.
Good morning. Boy, do we have a lot of deception going on in Genesis. It starts from the very beginning and continues and continues. Last week's Parsha, Jacob fought with the angel and had to... Can I take this off while I'm up here?
Yes, you can.
Thank you. Got together with Esau, thinking that he could be killed. And then the rape of his daughter Dinah and the deception that his sons went and had convinced the Shechemites to circumcise themselves to be one, but that was a deception. And there again, hard things fell upon Jacob. This week's Parsha, Vayeshev Yaakov, is Jacob settles in the land of his fathers traveled and the land of Canaan. Well, you think, oh, finally, he settles. That's the beginning. That's the name of this Parsha. But 3 verses later, we hear that Joseph is Jacob's favorite son. Where have we heard that before? Don't they learn? Think about it. What about his father? Jacob's father loved Esau more. The same thing is being repeated. So we begin with the story of Joseph, one of the longer narratives that we have in Torah. And the brothers throw him into a pit. We're going to kill him. Compromise, throw him into a pit. He's sold off to Midianites, to Ishmaelites, and then to Potiphar, the viceroy of the Pharaoh in Egypt. There, he's the head of the household, sort of, so to speak, of Potiphar. But, Joseph's a handsome man, and Potiphar's wife took a liking to him, and with numerous attempts tried to seduce him. Joseph, on the other hand, wanted nothing of it, but she did grab his coat. Since she spurned him, she screams, he's not there, he's innocent, but he's thrown into dungeon. In the dungeon, he becomes kind of the leader of the prisoners. God looked favorably upon him. And 2 of the servants of Pharaoh were sent to prison, the cupbearer of wine and the baker. They had dreams, and Joseph, they asked Joseph if he could interpret the dreams. He said, in essence, one of you will live and one of you will die. But you, the cupbearer, please remember me and put in a good word. Well, the dreams did indeed come true. But I left something out. I left something out that kind of just pops up in this week's Parsha. It's all about Jacob. But we have the story about all about Joseph. Here, we have Joseph's older brother, Judah, and the story about him and his daughter-in-law, Tamar. It's a somewhat disturbing story, but there's a number of different lessons we can take away from it. As you recall, Judah gets married, has 3 children. He marries his first child, to Tamar. He dies before she gives birth. She's a childless widow. So what you do as the custom was then, Yabum, which is the Levirate marriage, the brother marries the childless brother. So she marries Onam. He also dies before she's able to conceive. So now, Judah's a little bit worried. It's like, who is this woman? What's happening here? 2 of my children have died. I'm a little bit afraid to give my youngest, Shelah, to her. He had some time because Shelah was still a young boy, a lad, not yet of marriage age. So he sends Tamar off to her father's home in Timnah, the town of Timnah. Meanwhile, time has passed. Judah's wife dies, and Shelah, his son, is now of age to marry, but he does nothing. However, Tamar hears that Judah will be coming into the neighborhood, in the town. So she develops a plan. She leaves the city limits, goes to the crossroads, puts on a veil, and dresses like a harlot, like a prostitute. And when Judah comes along his way, he sees her, not realizing it's his daughter-in-law, thinking that she's a prostitute, he asks to lie with her for a choice goat. And she said, well, that's fine. He goes, I can bring it by tomorrow. He goes, well, I need a pledge. So she asked Judah for the pledge of the signet ring, the staff, and cord. They lay together. She conceives. She leaves She leaves, goes back to town, takes off her harlot dress, puts on her widow's garb, and goes back to town. Judah, meanwhile, next day tries to pay her with the goat. Can't find her. Gone. With a buddy of his. Hurrah, I think, was his name. He said, we don't know. Where is she? Judah said, she's got this ring. Let's not bring shame upon ourselves. Let her keep it. He goes back, thinks a little bit nothing of it, but sure enough, word gets to Judah that Tamar is 3 months pregnant. So Judah says she is a harlot. He says, bring her so she be punished and die. Here's the interesting part of the story. When Tamar comes up to be essentially burned, some say burned with a brand, so to say that she's a harlot, some to say to death, to be disputed. But she says, she gives word, she sends the signet ring, the staff, and the cord to Judah with a message saying, to whom these belong is the father of my child. Imagine what Judah would have thought. Shock and horror. Oh my gosh, he was just punched in the gut. Can I believe what I just did? Yet, here's where Judah stands up, and he makes a statement. She is correct. She is more righteous than I. She is more righteous than I. He admits his mistake and also gives credit where credit is due. His mistake, he didn't give Shelah that it was promised to her. So we learn from this, and also what we learn not just from Judah, where he stands up to his mistake. It's the first time in the Torah where someone admitted they did wrong. Judah did that. Then, what Tamar did was kept embarrassment away from Judah. She did it in a subtle way. She could have made a big fuss. It was silent. It was just a message. She has 2 children from Judah. And the 2 children, twins, Peretz was one who actually is in the lineage from Peretz, from Judah and Tamar, goes down to Ruth and King David, and of course the line of the Messiah. So why is this put in this section with Joseph, when the story goes all about Joseph? Well, after what happened to Joseph, thrown in the pit, Judah was the main guy. And he was fumbling with that whole aspect. He went down low, morally and economically. And it's just to remind him, with the death of his own 2 children and what transpired, he recognizes the harm and pain that he gave to his father Jacob. Thank you.
Thank you very much, David. Welcome to all of you again here. All of you again here and afar. Rabbi, I was wondering if there's people at home wanted to ask any questions, if we could in some way perhaps text them to you or another way to communicate.
They can put them in the chat on Facebook or YouTube, and every once in a while I'll check
Okay.
to see if there's questions from the home audience.
All right. I don't have to introduce, although it gives me great honor to introduce our next speaker. We all know him. He's been in Colorado Springs 4 years at Temple Shalom, and we all acknowledge the great changes that have occurred in this congregation since his arrival.
Maybe that's good. Yeah, sure.
I'd like to introduce to you Rabbi Jay Sherwood, a graduate of UCLA and the Jewish Institute of Learning in California. Did I get that right? Or close enough?
Academy for Jewish Religion, California.
Academy for Jewish Religion in California. He's going to speak to us about a recent trip he made to a country that some of us might have trouble putting a finger on the map, Azerbaijan. He'll tell you why he went and the interesting context of this trip. Thank you, Rabbi.
All right, we're good there? Okay, thank you. Well, good afternoon, everyone. I hope, or good morning. I guess it's still morning. It's not afternoon yet, is it? Maybe we'll still be here this afternoon. We'll see. For those of you who are watching us on YouTube and on Facebook, we will let you, if you want, I'll check every once in a while on here to see if there's any questions coming from that crowd that's on YouTube and Facebook. But we'll get started here and talking about, I guess I'm going to be a little social distance from all of you, and you can hear me a little better this way. But talking about a multicultural journey to Azerbaijan. I thought we might start off, first of all, by answering the question that many people have asked me since I returned back to Colorado Springs on November 1st, and that question is on the next slide. Where is Azerbaijan? And the answer is this, right there. You see where it is? So what we have here, here's Israel right here. Here's Turkey right here. And then I don't think I have maybe I do have a pointer stick. There we go. We'll use this thing. That'll be my pointer. There we go. Perfect. See, it's always sitting on. So we have Israel right here on our map. Here's Turkey. This is the end of Greece right here, by the way. And then we come across here and we have Iraq. So coming right across, here is Azerbaijan. Right here, the star that you can see right here. This is Baku, which is the capital of Azerbaijan. And just so we see what Azerbaijan is surrounded by, this is the Caspian Sea. Across the Caspian Sea is Turkmenistan, and this is Kazakhstan up here. But directly next to Azerbaijan, to the east, is the Caspian Sea. To the west is Georgia and Armenia. To the north, this right here, is the bottom tip of Russia, and Azerbaijan's largest border to the south is Iran. How close did I come to Iran? On the next to the last day of or 3 days before our trip ended, I had lunch right about here. We were a mile, this top little point right here, of where you can see the bluish green for Iran and the red for Azerbaijan. We were about a mile north of the Iranian border right here. We had lunch one day as we were traveling from this end of the country back over to Baku. So Azerbaijan's in kind of what sometimes is a dangerous neighborhood, with Iran to the south and Russia to the north. And then in the last 30 years, there have been 2 wars, including one in the year 2020 with Armenia over a piece of territory, and we'll talk about that a little bit more. But does that clear up where Azerbaijan is for everyone? It's a former Soviet republic. It is a Muslim country, and they claim to be the only Muslim country in the world that has a secular government. So a Muslim country with a secular government. In terms of how things operate in the country, my wife and daughter were certainly interested to know the role of women in Azerbaijan. I can tell you this, in my entire week we were in the country for 8 days. In the 8 days in this Muslim country, I counted the number of women I saw in a burqa. Anybody want to guess what that number was? It was 2. So in 8 days in a Muslim country, I saw 2 women in a burqa in the entire place where I was the entire time. And that includes the women who were in the mosques that we visited. So, and I did not see very many women also even covering their heads. And so in the streets of Baku, the capital, and in a little bit we'll see some pictures of some of the architecture of Baku. But in the streets, as we were walking down the streets of the capital, you could have been walking down the streets of Paris. I mean, we were walking by the Armani store, which was next to the Cartier store, which was next to the Maserati store. And the women walking down the street in that section of town were dressed like they were fashion models in Paris. The women in the offices that we visited were dressed very professionally. So it's not the image of what you might think of what a Muslim country would look like and what women in the Muslim country would look like. There were women walking down the street dressed like the women that are in this room right now. And so that was my first thing that was kind of surprising to me, is how little I saw of what I expected to be this very conservative look about the country. But the country they talk about, because we are right here in Eurasia, we're right at the confluence of Europe on that side and Asia over here. And the thing that I heard a lot is, what is Azerbaijan? They said 2 things. Azerbaijan is the Switzerland of Central Europe and Eurasia, and Baku is the Paris of Eurasia. And so this is how they look at themselves. They are an oil-rich country. During the time that the Soviet Union existed, they were the main oil fields of the Soviet Union. So guess who would love to take over Azerbaijan again? Russia, because they'd love to have Azerbaijan's oil money. This northern part of Iran right here, where you see Tabriz right here, this and where this lake is, this northern part of Iran. Well, let me tell you this. Azerbaijan has a population of 10 million people. That's the country's population. This northern part of Iran right here has a population of about 23 million people. 20 million of those 23 million are Azerbaijanis, even though they're Iranians. This province that's right here, or excuse me, this province right here, has a name in Iran. It's called, the name of this province, Eastern Azerbaijan. The name of this province is called Western Azerbaijan. I don't speak Farsi, but the translation from the Farsi is Eastern Azerbaijan and Western Azerbaijan. It's almost all Azerbaijanis. So Iran is very careful what goes on here because they're worried that they have 20 million Azerbaijanis who would support this country over this country. So it's an interesting relationship that goes on this border. We'll talk a little bit more about that in a little bit here, but about our particular trip. Who were our hosts and what was the purpose of our trip? I have to be honest with you, before I went on the trip, I wasn't quite sure about the answer to either one of those questions. I learned the answers to those questions as the trip went on. And so, our hosts. I was officially invited by Nassimi Agayev, who is the Consul General of Azerbaijan for the Western United States. He is based in Los Angeles. He has been there for about a decade. And interestingly, of all of the consulates in Los Angeles on the western half of the United States, where would you think the dean of the consulate corps, what country would that guy come from? England, France, right? The dean of the consulate corps in Los Angeles is Nassimi Agayev from Azerbaijan. He's the head there are over 100 consulates in Los Angeles. They meet together as a group from time to time, and he is the dean or the president of that group. I had lunch with him in Los Angeles before we left for the trip, and I will tell you, if you need an example of what the consummate politician is, his picture is right there. This guy is the ultimate salesman for Azerbaijan. He is the ultimate salesman for international relations, and he can speak international relations to you. I found this out over lunch at a nice Italian restaurant in Brentwood, California, in Brentwood area of Los Angeles. He speaks 7 languages fluently. So he really doesn't have any problem talking with most of the diplomatic corps in Los Angeles. So we were invited by Nassimi. I'm hoping to bring Nassimi here in the springtime. We're working on getting him to meet with the Colorado State Senate in the spring. And if that does work out for him to meet with the Senate this spring, then we're going to bring him here to Colorado Springs. He's going to meet with our Pikes Peak Interfaith Coalition and also make an appearance here at Temple Shalom. So I'm hoping that's going to be this spring that we're going to bring him out. Really, really interesting guy. And I don't know if there's anybody who loves Azerbaijan more than this guy. He might love Azerbaijan more than the president of Azerbaijan loves Azerbaijan. Really interesting character. And if Nassimi was here today, I would thank him for letting me be part of this delegation that he invited me to be part of. And I would also thank him for flying all of us business class and putting us up in a 5-star hotel right on the shore of the Caspian Sea. Which was, I've never flown business class before. And what I learned for flying business class on Turkish Airlines from Los Angeles to Istanbul, and then from Istanbul to Baku, Azerbaijan, what I learned from that is that if I ever win the lottery, I will only fly business class for the rest of my life because, wow, I've never had that experience and I would love to have that again. But, and we would also thank the Turkish Consul General who actually arranged for our upgrade on the airplanes in both directions. We were also guests of the Baku International Multicultural Center. They were our main hosts while we were in the country. This is, while it sounds like some nice nonprofit thing that's going on, this is actually an official government agency of Azerbaijan, mandated by the president. I won't comment on elections in Azerbaijan because I've never witnessed one. However, I can tell you, I'm going to just get my water bottle here. I can tell you that Mr. Aliyev has been the president of Azerbaijan, the duly elected every election period. Mr. Aliyev has been the president of Azerbaijan for over 20 years. Before that, his father was the president of Azerbaijan. In the election immediately following his father's death, he became the president of Azerbaijan. Azerbaijan became an independent nation in 1991 after the breakup of the Soviet Union. There were two presidents before Mr. Aliyev's father. They were both very short-lived presidents, and Mr. Aliyev now is the president of the country. I suspect he's probably going to win the next election and the one after that, but I'm not an election expert, so what do I know? But these folks at the Baku International Multicultural Center, Ravan Hassanov and Eitan Garaman, if you take a look at her, looks like a businesswoman in America, right? No head coverings, wearing a business suit, sitting next to another woman who's wearing short sleeves, if you look right there. She's also Azerbaijani. We met quite often with these two at the very beginning of our journey, and at the end of our journey, they were involved in many of the conferences that we attended along the way. And multiculturalism, as you'll see in just another slide or two, is a very important aspect that Azerbaijan is trying to sell to the world. I believe that Mr. Aliyev, as he's referred to in Azerbaijan in English in the translation, dear Mr. President, never Mr. President, always dear Mr. President. But dear Mr. President realizes that his oil wealth in his nation is probably good for another couple of decades. And then the oil wealth might disappear once we start moving away from fossil fuels. He's trying to find another thing that's important about his country because, quite frankly, the place was beautiful. I mean, really, really a beautiful place to visit. So what can he sell to the world if he can't sell oil anymore? And what he can sell to the world is the Azerbaijani version of multiculturalism. And that's why he started this International Multicultural Center, to show the world that Azerbaijan should be the example to the world of interfaith relationships and multiculturalism. And so this is the idea, and these two folks are in charge of that. Mr. Hassanov was appointed to this position directly by the president. And according to him, he will remain in that position until the president says he's no longer in that position. He actually has a private business on the side, which he'd like to do full-time, and we asked him, when are you going to do it full-time? And he said, when dear Mr. President Aliyev says that it's time for me to do that. But right now, he likes the job I'm doing. So these were our hosts that brought us through the country. There were three parts to our trip. One, to explore Azerbaijan's model of multiculturalism and interfaith relations. To hear about the Nagorno-Karabakh dispute. Raise your hand in the room if you've ever even heard of Nagorno-Karabakh. 1, 2 people. How many of you in the room know that that's actually the name of a place and not like the name of a food or a restaurant or a movie? Only like 4 of you know that. Well, now you know that this is the name of a region, and there was a dispute between Azerbaijan and Armenia. I shouldn't say there was a dispute. I should say there is a dispute between Azerbaijan and Armenia that is ongoing about this particular area. And then finally, Israel and Azerbaijan relationship. We spent some time with Israel's ambassador to Azerbaijan and learned quite a bit about Israel's relationship there. And so, as I said, we'll meet the president. We didn't get to meet the president on the trip, but you'll get to meet him. This is Ilham Aliyev, president of Azerbaijan. His big quote is this: today, multiculturalism is a state policy as well as a lifestyle in Azerbaijan. I can speak to both of those things. It is clearly a state policy because of the International Multicultural Center that was our host, because we also met with the Minister of Religion. We had a meeting with him. We'll see a picture of that later on. And so it's definitely there are state agencies that deal with this idea. And a lifestyle from our interactions with religious people in the country across several faiths, we were able to see that that is indeed the case, that it's a lifestyle. I can tell you this, on several occasions, while walking around the city of Baku, the capital of the country, with my kippah on my head in a Muslim country. Let me repeat that. With a kippah on my head in a Muslim country. I stopped counting when it reached 10. I had 10, at least 10, it was more than 10 because I stopped counting at 10. But over the time in the capital of Baku, being a Jew with a kippah on my head, walking around in the capital of a Muslim country, more than 10 times, I had people look at me and say, "Go Israel." In a Muslim country, secular government, Muslim country, more than 10 times, I had people say to me, in English, "Go Israel," because I figured they didn't think I spoke Azerbaijani. I saw a hand.
I think this could be political because Israel supported in this recent conflict. They supported Azerbaijan with weapons, right?
Yes, they did. Israel supported Azerbaijan in the conflict with Armenia. In the third part of my presentation, we're going to talk about that a little bit. But yes, there's a very, very strong relationship between Israel and Azerbaijan. I'll just say this about that right now, and that's this. When we were sitting with the head of the Multicultural Center, he said to us, "You know, the Abraham Accords, these few Arab countries and the Gulf states have signed a thing, and they've been friends." I'm going to try to do it the way he said it to me. They signed this thing and they've been friends with Israel for 6 months or a year with these Abraham Accords. That's so cute. We've been friends with Israel for 30 years. So, very strong relationship between Azerbaijan and Israel, and at the end we'll talk about that relationship. Don.
Are they primarily Sunni or Shia?
It's primarily a Shia country, but there are Sunni Muslims there as well. In just a moment we're going to talk about that. So if we go to the next slide here, this is our American delegation. 2 rabbis, 3 Pakistani American Muslim leaders, 1 Baptist bishop, this is the Baptist bishop right here, and 1 Lutheran pastor. Clearly, that's one of the rabbis. Anybody want to guess who the other rabbi is? Anybody want to guess which one of the other people on here is the other rabbi? This is the Lutheran pastor. She's a Guatemalan Lutheran pastor who deals with the Guatemalan community in Los Angeles, which is a very, very large, the Lutheran Guatemalan community is very, very large in California, in Los Angeles. This is Bishop Mendez, who's the bishop of the Baptist Church of Los Angeles, which gives you a choice of 1, 2, 3, or 4 for the other rabbi. Any guesses? It's the tall guy in the middle here. This is Rabbi Ron Lee Paz from Los Angeles. His daughter Hannah is our 4th and 5th grade teacher in our religious school here. She's a senior at UCCS. He's also a classmate of mine from the Academy for Jewish Religion, California, and he's actually the one who connected me to Nassimi Agayev in Los Angeles that wound up getting me invited to be part of the delegation. This is the only time on the trip. Here we are in the airport. Departures, arrivals, the Azerbaijani flag. The nicest airport I've ever been in my life. As an American, I'm embarrassed to say that airport is far nicer than any airport I have ever been in the United States of America. I think that's because the country has billions and billions of dollars in oil money, and the president likes to spend it on making his country look amazing. And so, high-tech everything. You know the escalators and those moving sidewalks? They creep along, barely moving, until they sense a human, and then they go up to regular speed, and then as soon as you're off of them, they go back down to save energy in the airport. Everything's super high-tech and amazing there. This picture was taken when we arrived. This was pretty much the only time that we did not have photographers or television cameras with us during most of the trip, because our trip was recorded, including interviews with us, and it was presented at the end of our week there on the Azerbaijani equivalent. I'm not sure if it was either Nightline or The Tonight Show, but it was kind of a combination of that. On the very last night, it was presented on that with quotes from us and pictures and video, etc., etc. So 1, 2, and 3, interesting, not imams, because the Azerbaijani government didn't want imams from America coming. They wanted Muslim leaders who were not imams. I still don't know the answer to my question, which is why? I suspect they didn't want they thought some American imams might be too radical compared to the imams in their country. That's my suspicion, but I don't know. Moving on. So we encountered mostly three worlds: the Muslim world, the Jewish world, and the Christian world. Although there is a Baha'i community in Azerbaijan, and there is a Zoroastrian community in Azerbaijan, both very small. We had minimal contact with those areas, but mostly our time was spent exploring the world of the Muslim world, the Jewish world, and the Christian world in Azerbaijan. Since Azerbaijan is a Muslim country, I thought we might start with the Muslims. This is the Heydar Aliyev Mosque. It is the largest mosque in the entire country of Azerbaijan. It is named after Heydar Aliyev, the father of the current president of Azerbaijan. By the way, the cultural center, which you'll see a picture of later, is named the Heydar Aliyev Cultural Center. Anybody want to guess the name of the airport in Baku? It is the Heydar Aliyev Airport. The new airport that's being built in the center of the country, named after the daughter of the president, who's a socialite in Central Europe. But this is the largest mosque in the country. Here's what's interesting about this mosque. We'll go to the next picture. The mosque has, this is Rahim. Rahim works for the the Multicultural Center. He was our translator. Rahim speaks, I believe, 9 languages, if I'm not mistaken. And Rahim, he's written all sorts of articles on this area, but he translated for us and took us around all the time. This is our group. You will notice in the mosque that our Lutheran pastor has her hair covered and such. It was interesting. In the mosque was the only place that it was told to her that she should not address the men in the room. Everywhere else we went, she was allowed to address the men in the room. In this mosque, she was told she was not to address the men in the room. If she had a question, it was asked through the bishop who was standing next to her, Bishop Mendez. Kind of an interesting thing there. But the imam of this mosque is this guy. Wait a minute. The imam of this mosque is this guy. 2 imams in this mosque. Are you ready to blow your mind about this mosque? This guy is the Shiite imam of the mosque. This guy is the Sunni imam of the mosque. Prayers in this mosque are Sunni and Shia every other day. The Sunni imam leads prayers on Sunday, and then the Shiite imam on Monday. So every other Friday, the prayers are either Sunni or Shia, because odd number of days in the week, right? They switch off every other day. So every other Friday, because of the odd number, Fridays, their important day of prayer in the afternoon, is either Sunni or Shia, alternating weeks. The Shia don't show up on the Shia day, and the Sunnis don't show up on the Sunni day. Everybody shows up every day. There are some differences in the way the Sunni and the Shia pray. When the Sunni pray, they hold their hands like this. When the Shia pray, they hold their hands like this. It's sort of like the Reform prayer book says, Mechaye HaKol, and the Conservative prayer book says, Mechaye HaMeitim. Robert? No, we're not getting another rabbi. But I bring this up because to me this was fascinating. I said, I in this meeting with them, we spent 2 hours with these guys, and in the meeting with them I said, I'm fascinated by this idea because you guys are basically 2 denominations in the same building. I'm the rabbi of a congregation that has 2 denominations in the same building. And I ask questions, how do you make this work? How do you not get the Shiite people to not complain when the Sunni guy's leading, or the Sunni people to not complain when the Shiite guy is leading? And they said to me, we just do what we do. The differences are not that big. One holds their hands this way, the other holds their hand this way. The introductory prayer that starts the service has 3 words. I can't tell you what they are, I don't speak Arabic, but there's 3 words that are different in the call to prayer at the beginning of the service in Sunni, and the call to prayer in the beginning of the service in Shia. And they told me what they were, and I don't remember what they were, but 3 words difference. And so if they don't like the 3 words, they tune out for the 3 words. He said, people obviously like what we do because on an average prayer afternoon, we have 1,000 people that come to the mosque. On a typical Friday, we have 2,000 people that come to the mosque, and no one complains about which type of prayer it is because the differences are not that big. And so we just, one leads, the other leads. And by the way, when the Shiite guy leads, the Sunni guy's standing right next to him. It's not like I'm not showing up when the other guy does. And interestingly, the school that these 2 guys went to, it's the exact same school. And the school teaches Sunni and Shia Islamic thought. It's in Azerbaijan, and Sunni and Shia students study together in the same school, what we would call a yeshiva in the Jewish world, but their Muslim version of a yeshiva, they study side by side. These 2 guys were in the same graduating class from this Muslim seminary, which I find absolutely fascinating. And we say, and does anybody complain about this? And they said, when we first started, there were a few complainers. They said, and they said, they go to a couple of other mosques across town that are either Sunni or Shia by themselves. And we said, what about radical Islam? And they said, that doesn't exist here. Why does it not exist here? Anybody want to answer that question? Dear Mr. President, dear Mr. President does not want any radical religion in his country because he wants to be considered a modern country like America, like France, like any other Western nation, and Western nations don't have radical religion in them. Yeah, sure they don't. But this is their idea. They said, if an imam in Azerbaijan preached a radical Islamic agenda, he would not be an imam in Azerbaijan. And we asked the question, how could that be? And they looked at us and they just said, because in Azerbaijan, that's how it would be. I think there might have been a camera from the president's office in the mosque, and that was as close to saying, dear Mr. President would remove them from the country as they could get. They wouldn't say that, but that's really the case. He wants middle-of-the-road religion everywhere so that they can be a modern country and not be considered some radical Islamic country like some of the nations that are in the vicinity of Azerbaijan. So he doesn't allow for radical imams to be in his country, and most of the imams at this point in the country have graduated from the Azerbaijani seminary for imams. There are some who are from other places, but most of them not, and that's how they're all set up. By the way, the head guy is this guy. He's a fun-looking guy, isn't he? This is the Sheikh. He is the Grand Mufti of Islam for all of the Caucasus. He's the main guy. We met up with him a few times along the way. That is the biggest smile I ever saw on him the entire time we met with him. We had a conference with him and a bunch of religious leaders, which we'll see a bit later, but actually a really, really interesting guy. He, by law, in the country of Azerbaijan, he is Shiite. His assistant imam, his assistant Grand Mufti is what? Sunni. By law in Azerbaijan, if the Grand Mufti is one side of Islam, the assistant Grand Mufti has to be the other side. By law in the country. This is declared by the president of the country and by the Congress. There, as I understand it, there are 2 parties in Congress, both of them support the president. Yes? Populations are absolutely intermixed. Yeah. There's no Sunni area, no Shia area. There are more Shia in the country than there are Sunni, but the Sunni and Shia live together. The main mosque here is in Baku. They pray together. There are Sunni mosques and Shia mosques, but it's not uncommon to see people cross that border and go pray in each other's mosques. And in the world, there's no separation between the two in daily life in the country. Yeah.
Why were there
By happenstance, the previous delegation that Bishop Mendez led, also he's been there 9 times, had 2 Catholic leaders in the delegation. So this delegation just by happenstance didn't, but the last one did. Robert.
Are there any areas in Azerbaijan that are using Sharia law?
So, no. The country is a secular country, so there is no religious law that runs the country. Sharia law governs religious life in the country, just like halakha would guide Jewish life in America or any other country for religious things. So Sharia law is considered very important for religious things. Marriage, burial, holidays, liturgy, that kind of thing. But in terms of daily life in the country, Sharia law plays no role in that. It is a secular country, and the president, who I think goes to the mosque a couple times a year, I think he goes to the mosque on Yom Kippur and Rosh Hashanah, I think are the 2. I think those are the 2 days. But yeah, Sharia law in daily life plays no role in the country. Because that was kind of interesting. So this is the, any questions any more about the Muslim world? We can talk a little bit more about it later. Any other questions about Muslim role in the country? Yeah.
Is there any pressure from the imams in Iran, from the Iranian government, to in some way radicalize the Muslims, Shiite Muslims?
So for those of you watching online, is there any pressure from the imams in Iran to radicalize the imams in Azerbaijan? We actually asked that exact question to these 2 guys right here. And they told us from the Iranian side of the border, every single day. From our side, the Azerbaijani, they're talking to us. From our side of the border, we ignore it. I think they ignore it because they know how dear Mr. President would react to that. But yes, the imams in Iran would love to radicalize the imams in Azerbaijan because it would help Iran take over Azerbaijan and give Iran more oil fields. So yes, there's pressure. There's often what's it called? The Imperial Guard. What's it called? The Iranian Revolutionary Guard. The Iranian Revolutionary Guard a few times a year makes an appearance right at the border of Azerbaijan. They amass a whole bunch of troops with tanks and all that kind of good stuff at the border to scare Azerbaijan. The last time it happened, which was last month, by the way, last month the Iranians sent tens of thousands of Revolutionary Guard troops with tanks to the Azerbaijani border. What did Azerbaijan's president do in response? Anybody know? No, he did one thing. He ordered 4 more helicopter drone observation units from Israel so that they could fly over the Iranian troops. That's what he did in response. With the Iranian Revolutionary Guard, there came a message from the Ayatollah in Iran for it's interesting the way the Iranians say the propaganda. We are speaking today to the Zionists to the north, that you must drop your alliance with the evil Zionist entity in Palestine. That was the statement from the Ayatollah in Iran. We're speaking to the Zionists to the north. Very interesting. Let's talk about Jews a little bit. The first thing we saw about Jews was this guy. The very first day we were there, they took us to this man's grave. Albert Aharonovich. You can see he died in 1992. He was a tank commander. This was the first war with Armenia over the Nagorno-Karabakh region, which I mentioned earlier. Armenia took over that territory in 1991 to 1992. Azerbaijan took most of it back at the end of 2020. Why did they take us to see this guy's grave? This tank commander is considered to be Azerbaijan's greatest military hero. He defeated the Armenians in several tank battles. Those tank battles, I am told by the Azerbaijani government, Anybody who's been to the United States War College, you can tell me if this is true or not, because I don't know. But the Azerbaijanis told us that this guy's tank strategies are still taught today at the US War College. He was eventually killed by the Armenians. Why did they take us to his grave? Because Azerbaijan's greatest war hero is this Jewish man. So they wanted to bring us to his grave to see, why does Azerbaijan love the Jewish community? Well, number one, our greatest war hero is a Jewish guy. This military cemetery is a beautiful park in the middle of Baku, in the middle of the city. But the rest of the Jewish community, this is the main synagogue of the European Jews of Azerbaijan. Beautiful building, yeah? Paid for 100% by the Azerbaijani government. This next building, this is the main synagogue of the Mountain Jews. Beautiful building, right? Paid for 100% by the Azerbaijani government. The Azerbaijani government is currently, for the European Jews, building a brand new mikvah. The building plans are beautiful. And around the corner from the Mountain Jews synagogue in Baku, the Azerbaijani government is paying for the most high-tech Jewish community center built anywhere in the entire world, including Israel. All paid for 100% by the government of Azerbaijan. There are 30,000 Jews in Azerbaijan. 10,000 European Jews, 20,000 Mountain Jews. The European Jewish community, it's led by, you guys tell me, who's the head of the European Jewish community? It's a Chabad guy. He was born in Israel. He's now an Azerbaijani citizen, and he sounds just like he grew up in Brooklyn. But because he studied for a while in the yeshiva in Brooklyn, but the head of the European Jewish community is a Chabad guy. It makes sense because they're an Ashkenazi brand of Judaism, so it makes sense that the head of the community would be Chabad with Chabad outreach. The Mountain Jews, on the other hand, it wouldn't make sense for Chabad to be there because the Mountain Jews, they claimed that the first Mountain Jews came to Azerbaijan the year after the destruction of the temple in the year 70. And then the Mountain Jews are populated by Persian Jews who moved up from Iran when they were forced out of Iran and came into Azerbaijan, and they became the bulk of the Mountain Jewish community. I was not able to go to the Red Town. I'm hoping to go back to Azerbaijan and go to the Red Town, which is off in the mountains. It's about a 3-hour drive away from Baku, and there are 4 or 5 Mountain Jewish synagogues in that area. But 20,000 Mountain Jews, 10,000 European Jews that live in the country. We asked the president of the Mountain Jews about president of the Mountain Jewish community about anti-Semitism in Azerbaijan. And he said, there is no word in the language Azeri, that's the Azerbaijani language, there is no word in Azeri for anti-Semitism because it doesn't exist. And then I asked his assistant, who they call rabbi, but he's not an ordained rabbi, but he leads services a lot there. I asked him in Hebrew because I knew that none of the Azerbaijani government agents who were in the room with us, right? They weren't secret agents, they were just part of our entourage, right? But I asked the guy in Hebrew, now tell me the truth, I said to him in Hebrew, tell me the truth, what's the story on anti-Semitism in this country? And in Hebrew, he responded to me, there is no anti-Semitism in this country. I then asked him in Hebrew, do any of these Azerbaijani government officials speak Hebrew? He said to me, I can guarantee you none of them do. And I said, so really there's no anti-Semitism in this country? And he said, I and the members of the Mountain Jewish community have never heard of even one single anti-Semitic incident in the history of this country. In fact, instead of anti-Semitism, they keep giving our president more awards, the president of the Jewish community. The president keeps giving him more awards for being a great Azerbaijani. So there you go. A little more about the Jews. Here we go, we're in the Mountain Jewish community. Here's the president of the Mountain Jewish community, Rabbi Ron Lee-Paz, and me. You can see Ron is laughing. Why is Ron laughing? This is our 5th meeting of the day that day, and there's yet again a giant chocolate cake. They served us tea and cake, tea and cake, tea and cake everywhere where we went. He gave all of the Christians and the Muslims these little slices of cake, and for the 2 rabbis, he gave us these humongous slices of cake. I took one bite of my piece of cake, and he put another slice of cake on my plate. He said, Rabbi, you're too skinny, you need to eat more cake. I said, I just lost 35 pounds this last year. I don't need any more cake. But this guy's been the president of the Azerbaijani Jewish community for over 30 years and a really interesting character. And we'll talk to you about how, at the very end, we'll see a little quote from him about all of the things that he's done. But here we are visiting with him to hear about the Jewish community. And then also we visited, this is all of us standing out here in the hallway of the synagogue there, in the Mountain Jews synagogue hallway. And then we also met with this character here. This is the Chabad rabbi who is, 2 or 3 of you are going to understand what I'm going to say right now. The rest of you might not. He says to me as I'm sitting next to him in the room here, and he finds out I'm from Colorado Springs. And he says to me, anybody who knows Chabad want to tell me what he says to me? How's Rabbi Boaz Vituk? When Boaz was studying yeshiva in Brooklyn, when I was in Brooklyn, when Boaz was studying in yeshiva in Brooklyn, he stayed with me. He helped babysit some of my kids. Tell Boaz that I said hello, which I did, by the way. But I'm in Azerbaijan with a guy born in Israel. I say I'm from Colorado Springs. The guy says, say hi to Boaz Vituk for me. So it's kind of funny. But so here we are you can see this is the end of the Aron Kodesh here, but there's one more picture of us hanging out together with our delegation in front of the Aron Kodesh in this is the main synagogue of the European Jews. You'll notice in a lot of our pictures we're not masked. We were asked by the Azerbaijani government to always take off our masks for the group pictures because they were going to be broadcast on TV. Immediately before and immediately after, we were all masked. By the way, proof of vaccination, I should talk about this for a second. Proof of vaccination before entering anywhere. To go to the mall, mask over mouth and nose, proof of vaccination. Everywhere we went, to go into restaurants, to go into malls, not a single person complained. I never saw anybody complain. To get on the plane on Turkish Airlines, we had to have our visa, a negative PCR test within the last 72 hours, and proof of vaccination. And they didn't want 2. They wanted 3. So all of us already got our boosters before we went on here because that's what was expected of us before we got on the plane. So lots of COVID protocols throughout, even though you'll see a bunch of pictures of us without. So that's any questions? Let me talk a couple things about the Jewish community before we move to the Christians. Number 1, there is no kosher butcher in Azerbaijan. Kosher meat is flown in from Israel twice a week and sold in some markets in Azerbaijan. The one mikveh that exists in the city of Baku is really crummy right now. That's why the Azerbaijani government is paying for a brand new, beautiful mikveh, high-tech login system and door codes, and you can go in with a door code. There'll be no fees or anything in the mikveh because the Azerbaijani government will maintain everything that's there. Their conversion in Azerbaijan, how many conversions per year in Azerbaijan? 0. Not a government policy, a Jewish policy. The European Jews and the Mountain Jews can't agree. Figure that. Some Jews can't agree. The European Jews and the Mountain Jews can't agree on the specifics of conversion, so you can study for conversion in Azerbaijan with the rabbis there, and then they put you on a plane to Israel where you complete your conversion with the chief rabbanut of Jerusalem. And that's the program for conversion in Azerbaijan. Yes, there are Azerbaijanis who have converted. They tell me it's in the hundreds of people. Not in the thousands, but in the hundreds. What does the government think about that? We ask the question. They're fine with it. The government doesn't care if Muslims become Jews or Jews become Muslims or Christian becomes Muslims or Muslims become Christian. They don't care as long as everybody engages in multiculturalism, because that's the buzzword of Azerbaijan: multiculturalism, multiculturalism, multiculturalism. And so that's the thing on kind of religious practices. There's one moil in Baku. There's 30,000 Jews in the country. There's one moil. He's a little busy. One, Susan, and then Rob.
I just wondered about intermarriage among all of the various groups. Did you ever talk about that?
So yeah, I did ask about that. Of course, the rabbis and the imams and all of the Christian religious officials told me there is no interfaith marriage in Azerbaijan. Rahim, this is Igar from the Multicultural Center. He said, after we left, each of the first place where the Muslims told us that, he said, there's interfaith marriage in Azerbaijan. All of the clergy will tell you there's not. I said, why is that? He said, because they don't officiate at those weddings, so they don't think they exist. But there's legal marriage, not religious marriage, there's legal marriage in Azerbaijan, and there are people who are intermarried in the country. He said he doesn't think it's a huge percentage, but he said my best friend is Muslim and his wife is Christian. And he said, and they got married in Azerbaijan, he told us. So he's like, so I know there's interfaith marriage because my best friend is married to a Christian woman. And she got married in the country. So, but all the clergy don't believe it exists because they don't officiate. They will only officiate at the one faith thing, but there is a secular marriage that happens in the country. He says, I don't think it's very widespread, but it's there. Robert, you had a question?
So if I understand this correctly, the Sunnis and the Shiites can be in the same mosque, but the Jews can't agree.
Yes, you heard that correctly. The Sunni and the Shia can be in the same mosque, but the Jews don't really always agree. But I'll tell you, the two presidents of the two Jewish communities, they get along fabulously. We were in a meeting one day, and one guy was the head of the European Jewish community, the president, not the Chabad rabbi, but the president, who is that's this guy right here. He's the president of the European Jewish community. He says, "What do I know from Judaism?" He says it in Azerbaijan. He said it in Russian. It was translated. What do I know from Judaism? I'm an actor. He's actually won like the equivalent of 2 Azerbaijani Tony Awards for being on stage. He's a very famous actor in Azerbaijan, this guy. He says, what do I know from Judaism? I'm an actor. I know how to stand up on stage and say lines and tell jokes. He says, what do I know about Judaism? I know that the president loves that I'm a Jew because he keeps giving me awards for being the leader of the Jewish community. The head of the mountain Jewish community then looks up and says, I have more. So they get along as far as like a Jewish community. The Jewish Community Center is going to be open to the European Jews and the mountain Jews. There's no issues about how it's going to be run. There's no issues about the couple of stores that have kosher food where you can buy kosher meat that's flown in. They both work together on this flight from Israel that comes twice a week with kosher meat. Everything's together. For some reason, on conversion, they can't come together on that. Go figure. I don't know. That's what it is. Yeah. And in the one mosque, the Sunni and the Shia pray together. But I went to Shabbat services with the mountain Jews. They said, which one do you want to go to? I said, I've been to a Chabad service. A Chabad service in Azerbaijan is a Chabad service in America, is a Chabad service in Israel. It's a Chabad. That's what they do. The Azerbaijani mountain Jew Persian mix kind of thing, that's not something I've been to. And it was 90% Persian and 10% a little bit not quite Persian. So I think that's what makes them a little bit different. They just had a couple of little customs of things they do, greeting each other and coming up for Aliyot and that kind of stuff. So, yeah. Let's talk a little bit about Christians. Or actually, before we do, renovations on the mountain Jewish community paid for by the Azerbaijani government. This beautiful, yeah, we can go ahead, go forward again. We're going backwards now. That's this one here. Yeah, go forward. Go forward a little. Renovations on the. You can see these beautiful hand-carved wooden doors coming in. A few more pictures of the renovations that are going on. This is the Aron Kodesh. Half of the Torah is in this one. Half of the Torah is in this one. You can see all the workbench and all this. This is all handcrafted woodwork. It's a multi-million-dollar renovation of this building that's going on right now for the main synagogue of the Mountain Jews in Baku. A couple more pictures to see. Beautiful stained glass windows in the building, and these will be the seats in there. One more I think we have here. You can see the beautiful hand carvings right here that are going to be part of the seats. And I think, is there one more picture that I have there? And then the beautiful carving. This is going to be the Torah reading table right here. Again, hand carved stuff. Really, really, really beautiful, amazing. While this is going on while the JCC is being built right around the corner, every penny of it paid for by the Azerbaijani government. They build all the mosques, they build all the synagogues, and they build all the churches. This building is the Roman Catholic Church. It's being renovated right now, by the way. 100% cost paid for by the Azerbaijani government. This is the Lutheran Church, which is also a music hall. And then third, this is the Russian Orthodox Church. We met with the bishop of the, or I should say the cardinal of the Roman Catholic Church, and also the bishop of the Russian Orthodox Church. I think the next picture will show our meeting with inside the main Russian Orthodox Church. This right here is the bishop of the Russian Orthodox Church in Azerbaijan. Right next to the Russian Orthodox Church, there's a brand new, beautiful office building, because they ran out of space at the office in the back of the church. So the Azerbaijani government built them this beautiful office building. And then they had some older nuns. So they built a beautiful building for the nuns to stay in as a monastery there of these Russian Orthodox nuns that were there. We were all convinced as we walked. We went into the office building to meet with, after we toured the church, we sat down with the bishop of the Russian Orthodox Church. We went into the office building and we sat down at a table with him, and anybody want to finish my sentence? They served us tea and cake. And the guys, I'm going to tell you this, Nasimi, if you're watching the tape of this later, I apologize to you in the Russian Orthodox Church. I know that the guys who served us tea and cake in the office building of the Russian Orthodox Church, I'm convinced they were KGB agents. I mean, I say that half jokingly, but half true. Like, these guys were like, they were way too serious to be members of this guy's church. Like, they were super, super serious. And we were wondering, and we actually asked Rahim, our multicultural guy, about, is there any connection with the KGB? He said, this might be politically incorrect to ask you, but we're going to ask you anyway. Is there any connection between the KGB, or the former KGB, whatever it is, and the Russian Orthodox Church? And he told us that there's no proof of it, but there's been accusations that through the Russian Orthodox Church, the Russians, just like the Iranians on the southern border are trying to influence what's going on in Azerbaijan, the Russians might be trying to influence what's going on in Azerbaijan by way of the Russian Orthodox Church, which has a sizable community in Azerbaijan. So he says, we don't have any proof that that's happened, but there have been accusations that that is indeed potentially the case.
So how many are there?
I don't know the exact numbers, but we were told that the Russian Orthodox community and the Roman Catholic community are both larger than the Jewish community. They didn't give us any exact numbers, but they did tell us that. Both of those, the Lutheran community, much, much smaller. All the Protestant, the Lutherans, the Baptists, etc., much, much smaller than the Jewish community. The Russian Orthodox and the Roman Catholic, much larger than the Jewish community. My guess is that the Jewish community is 30,000. I'm guessing maybe there's 50 to 100,000 of those. So aside from the Russian Orthodox Church, we also met with the cardinal of the Roman Catholic Church. Again, you'll see cake and tea and water on the table. This was also when we met with him on this particular day. This was meeting number 5 of the day. There were about 14 people around the table. Shall we count the cakes? 1, 2, 3. That's only half the table. There were 3 more on this half of the table. There were only 14 people. 6 cakes plus cookies, plus baklava, plus candy, plus Turkish delight. Yeah, and tea. If your teacup got half empty, it got replaced with a hot cup of tea in every place we went. Servants would come and replace your tea, even though half the tea was still there. But it was actually really nice. The cardinal here of the Roman Catholic Church, this blessing, you can see we all kind of look like we're in prayer here. It was very interesting. He spoke Russian, and so Rahim, our translator, translated from the Russian for us. But in his prayer that he said over the food, he asked for God to bless not only the food and his Catholic community, but also to bless the Muslim and Jewish communities of Azerbaijan. And he did not. This was very interesting to me too, because he had a mixed faith crowd. It was interesting. He's the head of the Roman Catholic Church of Azerbaijan. How did he not end his prayer over this food we were about to eat? In Jesus' name we pray. He didn't say that. He said, in God's name. That's how he ended the prayer. I was really fascinated by that because in most other places, the Catholic priest would end it saying, in Jesus' name we pray. He didn't. I thought it was really incredible, but it fit the pattern because everything is multiculturalism, multiculturalism, multiculturalism. Everybody get along between your religions. And so that was in the pattern of what we experienced the whole time that we were there. This is the middle of the Lutheran Church. Interesting. Are you ready for me to point out the chief Lutheran pastor of Azerbaijan? There she is in the blue jeans and the white jacket. That's the head of the Lutheran community in Azerbaijan, which numbers slightly more than 100 people. That's it. All of the Protestant denominations, while there are thousands of Roman Catholics, thousands of Russian Orthodox, they told us all the Protestant denominations number in the hundreds. The Lutherans, the Baptists, the Presbyterians, only in the hundreds of each of those denominations. Why? We asked that question too. This pastor, she told us, she believes because in that part of the world, not just Azerbaijan, but that part of the world, those are considered to be Western European and American denominations, and so they don't fit into the culture of being on the border of Eurasia. So that's why they're there. And very, very small numbers. Robert?
Were most of the members of those smaller organizations people that were in Azerbaijan for business or whatever, and not actually citizens?
Yes. So most of the people who are members of the Protestant denominations are people who came to Azerbaijan because of business, or they're descended from people who came to Azerbaijan for business and then stayed there. We were told that in the Lutheran community, and this makes sense, most of the Lutheran community are not native Azeri speakers, they're native German speakers who have learned Azeri, most of them. The Baptist community and the Presbyterian community are also descended from people who kind of came from other areas as well. Most of the Catholics who've been in Azerbaijan, or most of the Christians who've been in Azerbaijan for generations are Catholic, Roman Catholic, or Russian Orthodox, because those are the ones that kind of fit in the area there. The Russian Orthodox is bigger than the Roman Catholic, by the way. Yes?
So what about religions who don't get state sponsorship? I'm thinking perhaps the Mormons or some evangelical groups.
So what about some groups that don't have state sponsorship, the Mormons or other groups? The Mormons are negotiating with the Azerbaijani government right now to open up a Mormon temple in Azerbaijan. The heads of the Multicultural Center were in Utah in 2020, meeting with the heads of the Mormon of the Church of Latter-day Saints to have that negotiation to open up, and they believe that within the next 2 years there will be a Mormon temple in Baku. My first question: how does the president and your Multicultural Center feel about? The Mormons are all about proselytizing all the time, and they said, as long as they're not obnoxious about it, we're okay with it. I said, what does obnoxious mean? And the guy from the Multicultural Center said, dear Mr. President, we'll define that for us. So that was the answer to what does obnoxious mean. So the Mormons will be there in another couple of years. The Zoroastrianists also get state support, and their temples are supported. Still a small community, but they're there. The Baha'i are there. The Baha'i temple was built by the Azerbaijani government. Evangelicals, in terms of your, like, what we would call like your right-wing evangelicals in America, I don't know what else to call them. They're the more radical end of the evangelical world, not welcome in Azerbaijan. The same way that radical Muslim clerics are not welcome in Azerbaijan. Anybody who's out of the mainstream is not welcome in Azerbaijan because they want religion to be middle of the road, mainstream, multicultural, interfaith, multicultural, everybody get along. And so a radical evangelical wouldn't be welcome in the country because they would be outside of that spectrum. And so the government wouldn't support them and wouldn't allow it. Yeah.
Because obviously this comes from the top, right? All this multi.
Right, this all comes from the top. Yes, it comes from dear Mr. President Aliyev.
It would be interesting to know how this region was during the Russian Empire, and maybe that short segment when the Soviet Union fell apart, and these guys, father and son, came on, because those give us a more true picture of the society.
So Mr. Aliyev and his father, President Aliyev, the one who died, they were both members of the Politburo during the Soviet Union. Okay?
The question is, how was it when there was not so much of this pressure from the top?
Right, and so religion was just like in the Soviet Union, except that the Russian Orthodox Church still functioned in Azerbaijan. The Jewish community was left alone in Azerbaijan. The Roman Catholics and some of the other faiths were left alone in Azerbaijan. My understanding, as it was explained to me, I'm not an expert in this, but because we talked about that a little bit, that the religious communities there were kind of left alone and left under the older President Aliyev's kind of under his influence because of the oil. Because that area gave so much oil wealth to the Soviet Union that the leaders of the Soviet Union would kind of leave this region alone as long as they kept the oil fields going. That's sort of the explanation that was given to us. I know that doesn't completely answer your question, but that's kind of the explanation we were given. So, Mr. Aliyev on the Politburo, you can do whatever you want as long as the oil keeps flowing, and we'll let your local cultural people do whatever their thing is. But it's become multiculturalism has become much more prevalent since the fall of the Soviet Union and since growing there. So that's the only part of the answer to your question that I know. The rest of it I don't know. So I think we had one more picture do we have one more of, I want to talk for a moment about this church. Does this look like a church? What does it look like? It looks like a library. This is the Armenian Orthodox Church. Did we say that there was a war between Azerbaijan and Armenia? The Armenian Orthodox Church, which is being preserved by the Azerbaijani government, now serves as a branch of the presidential library. What is in that library? If we do one more slide, here's an example of what's in that library. This is an Armenian language Bible, Old Testament, New Testament Christian Bible. It was printed in Venice, Italy in the year 1733. It's one of the oldest examples of the Armenian library that is part of the Aliyev Presidential Library being preserved in the Armenian Church. We asked whether the Armenian Church would become an active church of the Armenian Orthodox Church again. The response we were told was that when the Armenian community decides that will happen, that will happen. A very guarded answer, right? So right now, the Armenian Orthodox Church is a library. Our Christian part of our delegation, they really didn't like that answer. And they kind of argued with the government officials about it, and we got no answer that would be more clear than that one. When the Armenian Orthodox community decides it'll be an active church again, that's when it'll happen, and that was the best answer we could get. Which really speaks to, is there a limit to multiculturalism? Apparently there might be limits to multiculturalism, and those might have to do with cross-border conflicts that happen in the region. Moving on a little bit here. The two heads of the Multicultural Center, religious leaders with an Azerbaijani flag on their side, all of us On our side, a meeting of the minds between the American delegation and the Azerbaijani delegation. All of our statements in this meeting were all broadcast on that Tonight Show or Nightline or whatever that was. When we had these were statements that we gave about different things of interfaith relations during the time we were there. And we got to, as we were hanging out, another slide here, hanging out. This is us hanging out with the staff of the Multicultural Center. This is the guy who's the chairman. This is that woman who's the assistant director right there. Notice how she's dressed. The other woman on the staff, notice how she's dressed. Normal business attire, right? This is the hallway. There was... Huh? Yeah, if we go back one picture, you'll notice there's bottles of water here, there's candy right here, and while he's speaking, we were each served a cup of tea and a plate of cookies and cake. So they just hadn't arrived. Yeah, the cake hadn't arrived yet, but it was coming. We'll go one more picture. Our Grand Mufti, leader, our translator, leader of the Russian Orthodox Church, president of the Jewish community, the cardinal of the Roman Catholic community, and you'll see the television cameras filming our meeting. We were sitting across from them. There were a few other, the Baha'i leader was there, the leader of the European Jewish community, the head of the Baptist community. All of our group were there, and every television station in Azerbaijan was filming this meeting in the offices. This is in the office of the Grand Mufti. And again, by the way, you see how there's a table in between every two people? Tea and cake on every table in between every two people that were there in this meeting with the Grand Mufti. So we spent several days. We had meetings with multicultural meetings with different faith leaders. This meeting, when these guys spoke, every one of them, including the Grand Mufti spoke like this, so he kind of never moved his mouth when he talked, and he talked kind of like this. And he would switch back and forth between Azeri and Russian. This guy spoke Russian, this guy spoke Azeri, this guy spoke Russian. They kind of went back and forth, and our translator, Rahim, over here translated no matter what language it was. I tried to test him out. I spoke Hebrew. I looked at him, I said, all right, Rahim, want to translate that? He looked at me, he's like, no, I'm not even going to try. But several other languages. Each one of them, when they spoke, they all began their remarks by praising the leaders of the other religions. Every meeting we had with other religious leaders, they began their meeting by praising the religious leaders of the other religions. Yeah.
So what were you talking about?
We were talking about the idea of how the rest of the world should follow their pattern of how all the religions get along. And how there's no anti-Semitism, there's no Islamophobia, there's no anti-Christian sentiment. None of that exists in the country because they've decided that no religions should be radicalized and everybody should get along, and Azerbaijan should be the model to the entire world of how religious people should get along with each other. And that was over and over and over again. That was the message they wanted to deliver to us. One, two, we'll go over here. 1, 2, 3. Perry, go ahead.
Did they talk at all about relations with Armenia?
We're going to get to relations with Armenia in just a second. So yes, they did talk about that with us. Was there another, Robert?
So many religions use proselytizing as a way to grow their religion. How is it so much different with I mean, you're talking about a model for the rest of the world, but there are so many areas of the world that basically want to force themselves upon the rest of the world. What kind of discussions do you have about changing that format?
So their big point was, before you can allow proselytizing and all of that in your country, you need to find the multicultural understanding. You need to find the balance point where you can praise the other religions around you and not find something wrong with the other religions around you. Each religion in and of itself needs to rid itself of its radical elements, because every religion has radical elements, and every religion needs to shut off those radical elements and not allow them to be part of their world, and find a place where they don't exist anymore. And then when every religion can find its moderation point, then we can see the beauty in the other religions around us, and we can all get along in a multicultural world. That's their big thesis. Does it work? They're a country with 10 million people, not America with 333 million people, not China with over 1 billion people, not India with over 1 billion people, they are a Muslim country with a secular government, not a Muslim country with a religious government, like so many other countries in that region of the world. They have a president who is very much in charge, right? Does that add a piece into it? So there are certain aspects of how their country runs that might make this not a possibility in other parts of the world. But I think there's definitely a truth to if religions get rid of their radical elements, they'd get along better. I think that's probably true. Is it easy to get to that place without a very strong presidential leadership in the form that they have it in Azerbaijan? I'm not so sure. But this model of the European Jews and the mountain Jews, they get along pretty well except for conversion, right? The Shiite and the Sunni, they get along pretty well. The biggest mosque has both of them, but they still have some separate mosques in the country. The Roman Catholic guy and the Russian Orthodox guy, they get along really well, but they have their own churches, right? And then the Protestants, they're kind of small. So, you know, things are, there's no radical imams in Azerbaijan. There's no radical evangelicals there. There's what's the Jewish equivalent? I don't know. The most right-wing Israeli settlers, maybe. I don't know. I'm trying to just figure out what would be in Judaism, whatever it might be, right? The Neturei Karta. That's if any of you know Neturei Karta in Israel, that would be like my radical right-wing religious people in Israel, Neturei Karta. None of that exists in Azerbaijan, and the government won't allow it to exist. So if they've removed the radical elements, so it's easy for them all to get along. And as we see, the multiculturalism does have its borders. We saw with the Armenian church. So does it work for the rest of the world? If we can get rid of the radical elements and other things, it probably does. Do we have the leadership in our world to make that happen? That's a questionable aspect. But their big thing, multiculturalism, 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 moderation in everything except cake and tea. But religiously, everything moderate in religion, and we'll all get along fine. And then they meet regularly. These leaders of these religious communities, they meet on a regular basis through the Multicultural Center. So that's the other aspect of meeting each other that way. So at least once a month they meet with each other. Marnie?
How often do they lead these trips like you and
A couple of times a year, the Multicultural Center hosts trips like this. Sometimes it's with religious leaders, sometimes it's with cultural leaders, sometimes it's with government officials, different things like that. And so they used to, pre-COVID, they used to have 2 annual international conferences on social justice and religion and things like that. And so they would bring people over for those. Since those have stopped because of COVID, they started doing these small delegation things and bringing people over for that. Yeah. Let's answer Perry's question a little bit. We'll go to the next slide here. Oh, there we are at another one of these meetings. This is a meeting. You can see our teacups, right? And this was a meeting with the Minister of Religion for the country. Just another cultural meeting. Moving on here. I thought I'd show you a little bit of just a little architecture before we talk about Armenia. These are the flame towers. Very modern, right? Like we might expect in, I don't know, Hong Kong or Singapore or what have you. These buildings kind of looks like Paris a little bit, I think. And this, every Soviet republic had a radio tower. This is your Soviet radio tower. There you go. By the way, this scene at night, LED screens, this is the Azerbaijani flag on. They also project flames and guys waving the flag and stuff on there. Really beautiful at night. You can watch the light show. Just a few more architectural scenes before we move on to Azerbaijan. Again, there's the flame towers. You can see that this kind of looks like I'm in Paris down here, doesn't it? I think it does. Very much looks like Paris. And this looks like some Russian apartment buildings and a couple of mosques over here on that corner. But the flame towers there in the middle of town, they're very prominent. If I'm not mistaken, hotel, office building, apartment building is what the three towers are. Another little bit of a few more architectural pieces. This is the Heydar Aliyev Cultural Museum. Kind of cool looking architecture. Next we have, from the old times of Azerbaijan, the Maiden Tower. There's a whole like Romeo and Juliet story about how a maiden threw herself off at the top of the tower because she thought her love was killed, etc., etc. This is in the old city of Azerbaijan. This will be a new hotel. Pretty impressive, huh? It's being built right now, right on the Caspian Sea. Next we have, let's see, what do we have here? A scene of Old Town Baku, with one of the modern things in the background there. Another couple of scenes of Baku here. I think this is the last one right here. Anybody want to guess what that is? That's actually, when I say it, it's going to make sense to you. This is the Carpet Museum, the Azerbaijani Carpet Museum. Right? See, it's a rolled up carpet. We went to this museum. The carpets in there are all handmade, unbelievable. They're incredible. So moving on to a little bit about Azerbaijan and Armenia. Here's the city of Baku. We traveled one day on a bus for 93 hours. I'm exaggerating. It was 9 hours. We came from Baku. We traveled all the way across the country. Here, this area, this is Armenia. This green right here, this is actually the Nakhchivan area. This is owned by Azerbaijan. This is Armenia here. These areas here in the blue, the green, and the gray, these were captured by Armenia in that war in 1992. They were captured from Azerbaijan. Today, Azerbaijan in 2020, there was a war between the two countries, and Azerbaijan captured all of this territory. The territory that is blue, this blue here going up into here, and this blue up here, was liberated, as you can see, by Azerbaijan. The green areas, it says under Armenian occupation. Not anymore. Those green areas were ceded to Azerbaijan in the peace treaty. So Azerbaijan, Kalbajar, they own this now, and then they also own this Agdam area here. We traveled from Baku to Agdam. Agdam was a great cultural center of Azerbaijan. Over the 30 years, it was dismantled. When you walk into the town, I didn't want to show you pictures of this, but when you walk into the town, there's almost nothing there. It was not blown up in the war. It was dismantled brick by brick, door by door, window by window, kitchen fixture by kitchen fixture, taken apart and sold by Armenia to the Russians and to the Iranians to fund their war effort, to fund the Armenian war effort. They dismantled the town and sold the bricks of the houses, the bricks of the opera house, the doors, the windows, everything. All you see are just, you just see the ground. That's all you see. You see, they dismantled the mosques that were there. They dismantled everything to take the entire city apart to pay for their war effort. The Azerbaijanis will tell you that they dismantled it because they wanted to engage in ethnic cleansing of the area. The Armenians will tell you they took it apart because the Azerbaijanis had already engaged in ethnic cleansing from the Armenians in the area. I'm going to tell you the truth that I think is the case is that Armenia needed the money, so they took apart some of the cities in this area that they hadn't settled. Agdam, Fuzuli, Jabrayil, these are areas that were taken apart to fund their war effort. That's what I really think happened because Armenia didn't resettle them. Shusha, this red star in the blue area. Shusha is considered, it's the Jerusalem of Azerbaijan. It is the cultural center of the country. Azerbaijan's greatest poets, Azerbaijan's greatest writers, Azerbaijan's greatest musicians, all were in Shusha. It was very important to the Azerbaijanis to capture Shusha. The United States State Department, this area is called Nagorno-Karabakh, right here, Nagorno-Karabakh. This area, the United States State Department says, under no circumstances, if you travel to Azerbaijan, do not go to Nagorno-Karabakh. Do not go there. there are still hostilities between Azerbaijan and Armenia. There are still landmines. It is a very dangerous place to go. Do not go there. We spent 2 days there. We were in Agdam, where we saw everything taken apart, and then we spent the night in a hotel in Ganja. We then went to Shusha. I didn't understand why we didn't take, there's a road from Ganja to Shusha. Why didn't we take this road, which was a 3-hour drive? Instead, we did this one, which was a 5-hour drive up through Fuzuli, where the new airport is going to be. It actually just opened. It opened up on October 31st, it opened actually. And there's a brand new road from Fuzuli up to Shusha, a brand new road being built up there, and we went up that way. I then learned that the blue and green areas are now controlled by Azerbaijan. This gray area here, there's a question as to who owns it. Is it Armenia? Is it Azerbaijan? I can tell you that there are Russian peacekeeper troops throughout this entire area. That's the gray. There are also hundreds of thousands of mines in the gray area there. And then there is, see this Lachin, right here from Shusha to Lachin, there is a road right here that the Russian army controls between this, which is a border town with Armenia, right there. If we go to the next slide, here's a close-up of the area. So here was, here's Agdam, where I told you the area we saw that was taken apart. It was a 1-hour drive on a dirt road that had been cleared of all of the mines for us to get to Agdam. We had to go through 3 military checkpoints to get into Agdam. Normal citizens are not allowed to go there. You have to go with a military escort and have permission of the government to go to Agdam and see what's being there. Agdam is being rebuilt by the Azerbaijani government. They plan to move 100,000 people there. And here's the other thing about why they want to build this up and wanted us to see it. Agdam will be the first city of over 100,000 people in the world to be a completely green energy city. That's their plan. 100% green energy city. We saw some of the plans, very, very interesting on how they're going to do this. And the people who used to live there before the war 30 years ago, most of those families want to move back. So again, our gray area here, this is our unknown who owns it. Here's Shusha right there. And you can see this, see this road and then this striped area here, getting to the border of Armenia, completely controlled by Russian peacekeepers in this area here. And then they're also through this area. And right here, there's an Armenian Orthodox monastery in this area. The whole blue area is controlled by Azerbaijan, as is this area controlled by Azerbaijan now. But there's an Armenian Orthodox monastery. The Russians control this little area to keep that Armenian. It's very important in Armenian culture for them to keep this right here. And then this area here, the rest of the light color here and the rest of the green, so this kind of bluish gray colors here, and all of the green was liberated in the war by Azerbaijan. The rest, this area and these were given as part of the settlement, and then this area, unknown who really owns it. By the way, this area has its own government who thinks they call it Artsakh. They say they're a country. They're an independent country. Azerbaijan does not recognize them. Armenia does not recognize them. Iran, Russia, the United States, and the United Nations do not recognize them. I think that means they're not a country, but what do I know? But Armenia claims this is Armenian territory. Azerbaijan claims this is Azerbaijani territory. My prediction, in another couple of years, there's going to be a war over this area right here. The rest of it's settled. There'll be another war that'll be here. And the Russians who are here and the Russians who are here will run back to Russia and get out of the way of the war. So this is this border dispute that happened at the end of the year here, at the end of last year. It was just a year ago that it all happened. So a little bit more about the Nagorno-Karabakh war. We'll take a picture here. This mountain right here on the other side of it, you can see the Azerbaijani flag over Shusha, or Shushi. They covered, Shushi is the Armenian name, Shusha is the Azerbaijani name. They're still rebuilding the city and the road into it. It was a dirt road into the city because it was cut off from Azerbaijan. The Azerbaijani flag put over the Armenian sign there. This hill right here, the other side is a sheer cliff. Right here, there's a sheer cliff. The story is this. In the dark of night, you can tell me if this is a legend or if it's real. In the dark of night, Azerbaijani troops, I won't say the next part out loud, who were trained by Israeli paratroopers. Azerbaijani troops came into the area and with no advanced weaponry scaled the cliff, because they should have come up the road over here or the road over there, but instead they scaled the cliff on the backside of this mountain and came up in the middle of the night and came into town with just primitive, just regular guns and such, came into town and surrounded all of the Armenian army that was in the town, took them all prisoner, put them on buses and took them out of town, and that's how they captured Shusha, climbing up on ropes up this cliff in the middle of the night with just a little tiny flashlight on their helmets as they climbed up the cliff. This is how the great special forces of Azerbaijan captured Shusha. Truth, legend, it's probably one of those. In the town of Shusha, there's of course the old city of Shusha, which you could see they put up the Azerbaijani name. This is the walls that surround the old city of Shusha. Hanging out there, Danny, if you will do one more slide. Rabbi Ron Lee Paz and I are hanging out there right in front of the gates to the old city of Shusha. What did Shusha look like when we got there? We'll show you a little bit of Shusha. This is a hotel. You can see all the windows blown out there. A church that was partially destroyed being rebuilt. This is a mosque that's being rebuilt. This was the main government office building when Azerbaijan ran the city. You can see that it's completely taken apart and they've been starting to be rebuilding it. So Shusha, this great cultural center, the Armenians say it was a cultural center for them as well, really in ruins, this city that was supposed to be, we were told, of all the cities in Azerbaijan, Shusha, and it was described to us this way, Shusha was the Jerusalem of Azerbaijan. Does this look like the Jerusalem of Azerbaijan to you? It was really quite sad to see how this place, the Armenians also said a cultural center, a really run-down, destroyed city that one day will become the Jerusalem of Azerbaijan again. And by the way, question.
What year was that, the destruction?
Over the last 30 years, since from 1992 to 2020. Over that whole 30 years, that was, yeah, it was a vibrant city up until 1992 when the Armenians took it over. And there were still musicians there, writers there, all of the cultural things that was this cultural center. It was there up until the Armenians took it over, and then it went into decline over the last 30 years and completely fell apart. And by the way, while we were there, if you just want to, Danny, hit the next button here. I did not take any pictures of Russian peacekeepers that I was not allowed to take pictures of. There were no Russian peacekeepers on the other side of that fence. I did not see any. I will tell you that there were no Russian peacekeepers there, not even the ones in this picture that I did not take with my phone. I don't think I erased it quite yet, but no, it's still there. But these are the Russian peacekeepers, and this is the road out of Shusha that goes down to that border with Armenia to allow the Armenians to come back and forth. And the Russian peacekeepers, even though they're on the other side of the fence, they weren't going to let us into Shusha. We sat in the bus for an hour, almost an hour, when we got to Shusha, and we had to wait. We got clearance from the Azerbaijani government. The Russians didn't want to let us in. They said, you're not a military vehicle, and only military and construction vehicles are allowed in. And there were apparently some negotiations between the Azerbaijani government and the Russian peacekeepers, and we were finally allowed into the city. We ate lunch at the restaurant that's open in Shusha. There's one restaurant that's open. It was a pretty good lunch. But this is the, any questions about kind of this Azerbaijan and Armenian taking over of this territory? It was really important to them that we saw it because they wanted us to know that they were going to rebuild the cultural center, and that church that was being rebuilt, it's an Armenian Orthodox church. They wanted us to see that we are going to rebuild the Armenian Orthodox church that the Armenians let go into disrepair. I'm not sure why that actually happened that way. I think they just they captured this area and they just abandoned it, and over 30 years the whole city kind of fell apart and they sold off parts of it. Margaret?
So from that, it looked like to the
Yeah. Yeah. So Danny, if you go back a couple of slides here, just go back to the map. Go back to the map that was there. Yeah, so right here, this green area, this is part of Azerbaijan, this is Armenia, and down here, this is Iran. Part of the treaty, this is an Azerbaijani-controlled territory. Part of the treaty is Armenia has to allow Azerbaijan to have a free passage between this area of Azerbaijan here and this area here. Right now, that consists of coming here, crossing the border into Iran, going over here, and coming up here in Ordubad, this city right here. That's how they have to do it right now, coming through Iran to do that. Supposedly, there will be a passageway right along this border area here so that they can get here. Right now, it's done by airplane from Baku, way over here. Now that there's an airport, which is here in Fuzuli, you can see there's two names on everything. One's the Armenian, the top name is the Armenian name, the bottom name is the Azerbaijani name. Now that there's an airport here in Fuzuli, you can take a short plane under an hour. I think it's like a half-hour plane ride from here into this other area of Azerbaijan.
How much space is there between how much space is the Armenian that they will have to cross eventually by road?
Right here, I was told that it's about an hour drive. I don't know what that translates to in terms of, windy road or not, but they told me if that passageway happens, it'll take 1 hour to get from Azerbaijan to Azerbaijan. This is not a heavily inhabited area. They told me that the 3 cities that are identified here, 1, 2, and 3, those are really the only 3 areas where there's a lot of people. There's a lot of farmland in the middle here, and a lot of mineral digging for minerals in the middle area there. And so it has value because of that. But all the oil fields are way over here near the Caspian Sea. But this is a mineral-rich and farming area here. So that's what that is. Yeah, Elliot.
Any insights on the relationship between Israel and Azerbaijan that you...
Any insights between Israel and Azerbaijan? Let's go forward through our one more, and one more after that. So as you ask about Israel and Azerbaijan, insights into Israel and Azerbaijan. Hit the next thing, if you will, here. Does that answer your question? Benjamin Netanyahu, President Aliyev. That's the first answer to your question. This picture was taken in the city of Baku, in the capital of Azerbaijan. This was taken about 1 year after Secretary of State Hillary Clinton was in Baku visiting there. Many Israeli ministers have visited Baku. Let's go to the next slide here. Why? Azerbaijan supplies 40% of Israel's oil. They are Israel's largest oil supporter and have been since 1991. 30 years, Azerbaijan has been the largest supplier of oil to Israel. Bezek, anybody heard of Bezek? Bezek is Israel's largest telephone company. Anybody heard of Bexel or Boxel? Boxel is one of Israel's larger cell phone companies. Bezek and Boxel are major players in the Azerbaijani phone market. Most of the phone lines in the capital of Baku were put into the ground and set up by Bezek. The first cell company to offer cell service in Azerbaijan was not an Azerbaijani company. It was Boxel, an Israeli cell phone company. Israel and Azerbaijan have what we were told is a series of quiet political and military understandings regarding Iran. What that means is this: Azerbaijan hates Iran, Israel hates Iran. If Israel needs to go to Iran and bomb some nuclear facilities, which occasionally happens, of course we know that doesn't really happen, but it occasionally happens, right? There's an agreement between Israel and Azerbaijan that the Israeli refueling tankers can land and fill up at the airports in Azerbaijan and take off to go refill the Israeli fighter planes. The exact details of that are top secret. But the fact that that exists is obviously not top secret, since we all know that that's the case. In the most recent war, Azerbaijan purchased $1.6 billion in drones, anti-aircraft, and missile defense systems before this war with Armenia. So there's a lot of trade going on. There are more than 100 Israeli tech startups with offices in Baku, Azerbaijan. Negotiations are underway to open Azerbaijani embassy in Israel. A trade and tourism office opened in Tel Aviv in July 2021. Azerbaijan still, to this day, votes against Israel in the United Nations. On every vote with Israel, they vote against Israel. The president of Azerbaijan calls George Deek. If we go to the next slide. The Israeli embassy in Azerbaijan opened in 1993. Remember we talked about the Abraham Accords and how they've been around for 6 months or a year with certain countries? The Israeli embassy in Azerbaijan opened in 1993. There's been an Israeli ambassador there ever since. George Deek is the current ambassador. Interesting Israeli trivia. He's the first Arab Israeli Christian to ever reach the rank of ambassador. The guy is brilliant and super, super impressive. George Deek told us, we met with him. He told us there's over 100 Israeli startups, tech startups, that have offices in Baku, Azerbaijan, and relationships are great. Before every vote, George Deek told us, before every vote that's taken in the United Nations where Azerbaijan is going to vote against Israel in the United Nations, the United Nations representative, in most cases, and in occasional cases, the president of Azerbaijan, calls George Deek on his cell phone and says, there's going to be another anti-Israel vote in the United Nations. We need to protect our status in the Muslim world, so we're going to vote no. You know we're going to do that. It's just one of those formal things we need to do because we need to protect our connections in the Muslim world. We're going to open the embassy in Israel soon. That phone call happens every time there's an anti-Israel vote in the United Nations. The plans are underway to make that embassy open. It's going to be in Tel Aviv, not Jerusalem. Again, they need to protect their status among the Muslim world, but it'll be in Tel Aviv, and the plans are that tourism office, trade and tourism office, will transition into an embassy within the next 2 years. This is what the people at the Multicultural Center told us. Azerbaijan's president Ilham Aliyev once compared his country's relationship to Israel to an iceberg, where he said, 9/10 of it is below the surface. In other words, we protect ourselves in the Muslim world, but we have a great relationship with Israel. Like I said, more than 10 times walking the streets of Baku, I was told, go Israel. Jews in Azerbaijan will close with this thought on the final screen. Chairman of the Mountain Jewish Community in Azerbaijan, Milik Evdayev, the guy you saw cutting cake and serving cake to me, said that the reality of life of Jews in Azerbaijan is like a dream. Here's his quote. Just imagine there is a Muslim government that spends millions of dollars building a beautiful synagogue for Jewish residents, or a Muslim country that honors a Jew as one of its greatest national heroes of war. It is our Jewish reality in Azerbaijan. So this is a little of my journey in Azerbaijan, really an amazing look at multiculturalism. Got to see about an international war that happened that I didn't know much about. I'm guessing most of you didn't know much about. And an interesting take on who owns this territory and such. And an amazing thing about, I really didn't know a lot. I knew Azerbaijan got along with Israel, but I didn't know as much as I know now about that there really is this very deep, long-lasting relationship between this Muslim country, Azerbaijan, and Israel. I'm grateful to the Azerbaijani government, to Nassimi Agayev, the Consul General, who arranged and invited me to be part of this delegation. And I'm glad that I got to go there and see this really interesting thing. And I hope that maybe they're right, that their message of multiculturalism and interfaith relations is a model for the world, and the world will listen to them and follow along. I hope they're right with that. But it's wonderful to see that the Jews there say they don't see any anti-Semitism in the country, that they feel very welcome there. And it's really a very, very interesting model. And I'm glad that there's a Muslim country that's been friends with Israel for 30 years and has Israel's back, especially in what goes on with Iran. So thanks for coming, everybody, today here in the building and online. And I hope you enjoyed and learned a little something. Thanks, everyone.